On ABC iView, ABC TV and online, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Leccidella.
This week, with Trump leading in the polls, could Democrats pull a switch and dump Joe Biden?
We're going to be talking to former party boss and one-time presidential candidate Howard Dean. But first...
There are renewed concerns this week over the age and mental acuity of President Joe Biden, already the oldest person ever to serve as President of the United States. At the age of 81, he's running for a second 4-year term. This should have been a good week for Biden. The special counsel appointed to investigate his mishandling of official documents after he left the vice presidency in 2017, Robert Hur, concluded no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. So, case closed, right? Wrong.
In the report, Hur referred to Biden's memory at least 9 times, that it was significantly limited and appeared hazy, that he had diminished faculties in advancing age and was a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
Ouch. That prompted Biden to call a primetime press conference at the White House last Thursday night. A hasty, high-risk play which started well enough when Biden stayed on teleprompter.
I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case.
Then Biden turned to Hur's assessment that his memory was failing, including the claim Biden couldn't remember when he served as vice president or when his son Beau died of brain cancer.
How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him.
Our Lady of where? An awkward pause, possibly down to grief or anger. It seemed, though, like when he went off script, Biden just couldn't remember where Beau's rosary had come from. Biden then said that Hur's comments about his memory were wrong and had no place in the report, which many would agree with. And after about 10 minutes of saying how good his memory was and sparring reasonably well with reporters, Biden left the podium, only to hear a shouted question about the war in Gaza. And he took the fateful decision to turn back to the podium. But before we see what happened next, Chaz, what about the report itself? What was in it? And most importantly, what the media got wrong about it.
They got almost everything wrong, John. We've seen a lot of this kind of reaction, for instance, from Republican Rep Byron Donalds, saying Trump's facing a 40-count indictment regarding classified info. Biden was just cleared by his own DOJ despite finding he willfully retained classified info. This is two-tiered justice in action. Now, that reaction there makes some sense if you believe what the media said, that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials. The news keeps on saying that. They said that in the clip we just played. And that's what Trump did. But almost none of them mentioned the first part of that sentence. Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials. They didn't uncover sufficient evidence, just some evidence. To prosecute someone, you need a lot of evidence. And if you think I'm reaching there, look what came 5 lines later in the report. We conclude the evidence does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So, there is no double standard here. They didn't prosecute Biden because they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute Biden. Do you think this is semantics? It's not. Hur referred to his inability to prove reasonable doubt 45 times during the report. I counted. He said about the documents that were found at the Biden Penn Center that the evidence does not suggest Biden willfully retained the documents, and they appear to have been sent there by mistake. He also said that the evidence does not show Biden knew that the passages he shared with his ghostwriter were classified. About some of the other memos that were found on Biden's property, Hur found the facts do not support the conclusion that Biden willfully retained them. There is literally only 2 folders that Hur thought Biden might have willfully retained. They were in this box here, in his garage. And that was what Hur was talking about when he said that Biden might present as having too poor a memory if you prosecuted him for that box. Hence comments like this from Fox's Will Kane. So Biden's too senile to be charged for mishandling classified documents, but he's not too senile to be president? But here is where the media dropped the ball again. That is not why Hur didn't charge Biden for those documents in the box. That was one of the reasons out of many, including some very compelling reasons that have been reported by pretty much no one. Like, for instance, we don't know why, how, or by whom the documents were placed in the box. And we don't know whether or when Biden carefully reviewed the box's contents. So they don't know who put the documents in the box, or in fact, if Biden even knew they were in the box. And then get this, no witness, photo, email, text message, or any other evidence places the Afghanistan documents at the Virginia home. In other words, the relevant documents may not have even been in Biden's Virginia house. And that is why, John, Biden was not charged. And it's also why this entire story is based on bullshit.
Which is pretty much what Biden was trying to communicate back at that White House press conference. And he had done pretty well. And he'd almost left the room when he heard that question about the conflict in Gaza. Biden, it seems, had something he wanted to say about that, maybe to change the news narrative. If he was ready to be more publicly critical of Israel, which he was, he said this.
The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top.
Now, saying Israel had gone over the top is a pretty big deal, but Biden was halting, maybe choosing his words carefully because of diplomatic sensitivities, but it was not particularly convincing. And then he said this.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, El Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in.
Biden said the president of Mexico was El Sisi. Well, of course, Abdel Fattah El Sisi is the president of Egypt. They're the ones that didn't want to open the border into Gaza. Sure, a slip of the tongue. Mexico and the border immigration crisis in America is on Biden's mind as well, but it wasn't a good look. And not just what he said, but the way that he said it as well. The White House must have known that it was a bit of a fiasco, and it was not an isolated slip. In recent days, Biden has accidentally referred to the French President Emmanuel Macron as Francois Mitterrand, the former French leader. He died in 1996. Okay, Macron, Mitterrand, easy mistake to make. But what about mixing up former German Chancellor Angela Merkel with the late Helmut Kohl, who was Chancellor of Germany in the 1980s and 1990s.
And his name doesn't sound anything like hers, and they're a different gender.
Yes, significantly different in appearances. So the White House quickly circled the wagons on all of this. Here's the Vice President, Kamala Harris, herself a former prosecutor. She was asked for her reaction to the report.
The comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate.
Yep, the Dems are not happy, John. They're not happy that the New York Times, the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal collectively published 81 articles in 4 days about Biden's memory. They're not happy that Ipsos found 86% of Americans think Biden is too old to serve another term on the weekend, whereas 62% think Trump is too old. Even 73% of Democrats thought that Biden was too old. Only 35% of Republicans think Trump's too old. 59% of Americans think both of them are too old. Lots of oldness. But most of all, Democrats are angry at the double standards. They have noted that the very next day after that Biden press conference, Trump didn't know what day it was. It was a Friday, but he said,
"Because I didn't need this. I had a very nice life. Nice Saturday afternoon. I could tell you if I weren't doing this where I would have been in a very nice location."
Nice Saturday afternoon? Wrong. And much like Biden, while bemoaning people beating up on verbal flubs, he had a verbal flub.
And if you say one word, a little bit mispronunciation, you end up front page. What's wrong with him?
He was on the front page that time, and that's what the Democrats were talking about. And then the day after, Trump confused Obama and Biden for like the millionth time.
Hundreds of billions of dollars came into NATO, and that's why they have money today, because of what I did. And then I hear that they like Obama better. They should like Obama better. You know why? Because he didn't ask for anything.
That was meant to be Biden. And they also note that experts say that the cognitive abilities of Biden and Trump can't be evaluated based on anecdotal memory lapses anyway. Memory lapses at any age are surprisingly normal, and for most people, they aren't a signal of mental decline. Look, that's all fine from the Democrats, but like David Axelrod has pointed out a few times, once you have a reputation, you can't unring the bell. And the most damaging situations in politics are the things that confirm people's pre-existing suspicions. So verbal stumbles are simply more damaging for Biden than they are for Trump. Democrats, you might as well just get used to it, because it's a fact.
Yeah, they're going to have to work with it. When Biden was in his 40s, they used to call him gaffe prone. Now it's all about his memory. But he is, at the moment, looking in danger of hiding from the media. It has become traditional for American presidents to be interviewed at the Super Bowl before the big game, just for a few minutes. But this year, Joe Biden decided to give it a miss, prompting more chatter that he's just too enfeebled to even talk about football for 5 minutes. Here's Fox's Greg Gutfeld.
True, it's the first time the NFL said a president had too much head trauma.
That kind of stuff and the special counsel's jobs may be why the White House released this video of Joe Biden complaining about snack food shrinkflation.
You know, when buying snacks for the game, you might have noticed one thing. Sports drinks bottles are smaller. A bag of chips has fewer chips, but they're still charging you just as much. And as an ice cream lover, what makes me the most angry is that ice cream cartons have actually shrunk in size, but not in price.
So no live interview, just a pre-recorded, heavily edited clip. No doubt that came across as relatable everyday Joe to some voters. He likes ice cream, but he also kind of looked a little bit like an old guy complaining to a pimply young store worker about, well, look at the size of this thing, I'm not paying for that.
Yeah, look, I wasn't so worried about how he looked, but I just couldn't help wondering, why was Biden sitting there complaining about inflation, which is what shrinkflation actually is? It sounds like a losing message to me for Joe Biden. Oh, by the way, don't skip easy interviews, Biden. Only Nixon and Reagan have held fewer press conferences than Biden has in 100 years. Biden held 54 in his first 2 years. Trump and Obama held more than 200 each. That is not helping his reputation of being fragile. The Super Bowl thing, a mistake.
And in Reagan's case, it was because he was becoming demented, and in Nixon's case, it was just that he was profoundly unlikable. So the less he did publicly, the better. Controversial comments from the former president, Donald Trump, raised more doubts about his fitness for office this week. Campaigning ahead of this month's South Carolina primary showdown against his former UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, Trump recounted an alleged conversation with an unnamed president of a big country who allegedly said,
Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes. Let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
So Trump is saying if NATO members don't pay, he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want. Well, as far back as 2006, NATO members did agree to defence spending of at least 2% of GDP. It is a guideline, it's no guarantee, and it is not a treaty requirement. It is money that they say that they will spend. Not to send to America like a golf club membership, as Trump seems to believe. What is a requirement, though, under the NATO treaty is that an armed attack against one or more of them is considered an attack against all of them, and NATO members must take such actions deemed necessary, including the use of armed force, i.e., if Russia invades a NATO member state like Poland, it's the same as if Russia were attacking Boston or New York, and the US must respond. They can't say, sorry, you haven't spent 2% of your GDP on defence, you're on your own. Trump's Republican rival Nikki Haley said that his comments were irresponsible.
I dealt with Russia every single day at the United Nations. Putin kills his opponents. He invades free countries. This is not someone you ever want to pal around with, and you certainly don't want to give them the right to invade a friend.
Trump palling around with Putin, and President Biden went further.
No other president in our history has ever bowed down to a Russian dictator. Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I never will. For God's sake, it's dumb, it's shameful, it's dangerous, it's un-American.
President Trump has also been raising questions about the whereabouts of Nikki Haley's husband.
Where's her husband? Oh, he's away. He's away. What happened to her husband? What happened to her husband? Where is he? He's gone. He knew. He knew.
That was weird. Michael Haley is serving with the South Carolina National Guard. He's midway through a year-long deployment in Africa. Trump knows that. Haley hit back at Trump on X-Twitter, Michael Haley that is. The difference between humans and animals? Animals would never let the dumbest ones lead the pack. Nikki Haley is also keen to remind Republican voters of the general context of this from Trump. After dodging the Vietnam draft, claiming bone spurs, Trump has repeatedly attacked veterans, including the late Senator John McCain and the families of Gold Star recipients who died. And Trump described American soldiers who were killed in France as, quote, losers and suckers.
Yeah, I actually disagree this is about Trump attacking people in the military, because I don't think he's actually attacking Michael Haley. I think he's attacking Nikki Haley. Remember how that clip that you played before ended?
He knew. He knew.
He knew? Michael Haley knew what exactly? I put to you that was a dog whistle to the internet, and the Daily Mail knew exactly what Trump was referring to, because they're the ones who reported last month that two men made claims to have had extramarital affairs with Nikki Haley back in 2008. Now, Haley denied those claims, but Trump seemed to be referring to those rumours with, he knew. That is why he was saying Michael Haley was gone. And if you look at the Twitter replies to Nikki Haley's response, Trump supporters heard him loud and clear. Nikki Haley also seemed to know what Trump was referring to when you see her response.
Donald, if you have something to say, don't say it behind my back. Get on a debate stage and say it to my face.
If you have something to say it to my face. Nikki Haley ain't talking about military deployments there. But back to NATO. The reason why Trump's comments were concerning is not because they signal Trump will abandon NATO. He said similar things in 2017, and he did not abandon NATO then. We should say also that Trump's story is almost certainly fictional. No president of a big country would call Trump sir, and if Trump had ever said anything like that, it would have been leaked immediately. The problem, though, is the signal it sends to Russia. Article 5, the Collective Defence Agreement, is considered NATO's most important clause because the collective defence commitment serves as the foundation of NATO's deterrent power. That's the whole point of NATO. It's a deterrent. It doesn't actually matter if Trump would really abandon Europe or if he's bluffing. If Putin thinks there's a crack in NATO's defence potentially, then that increases the chance of war considerably. That is what matters. I also want to pick up on John's point before that Trump still doesn't understand how NATO funding works 8 years later. It's not just NATO he's confused about either. Trump recently launched a similar policy about Ukraine.
The European nations, if you add them up, the economy is about the same size as the U.S., believe it or not. A lot of people are surprised. You add them all up, and they are in for about $20 billion, and we're in for $200 billion because we're stupid. All we have to do is say pay. Nobody ever says to them pay. You don't even hear that. I say pay. And they'll pay too. You have to equalize.
Okay, so he doesn't want to defund the Ukraine war. He just wants Europe to pay their fair share. Whether he wants them to pay $200 billion like America is, rather than $20 billion. Except Europe has actually spent twice as much on Ukraine as America has, $133 billion to $71 billion. Even if you just limit the comparison to military aid, Europe has still spent more. And that is before you count Europe's latest $55 billion package for Ukraine on top of all that. So Trump has no connection to reality here at all, which takes us back to that Biden press conference from before. Remember that answer in which Biden said Mexico instead of Egypt? Apart from that moment, it was otherwise cogent. It was, slow, but it was intelligent and it was off the cuff. And it was about an incredibly complicated situation. So voters essentially have a choice between a candidate who understands government but is prone to verbal confusion and is physically fading away before their eyes, or a candidate who is physically vigorous and vibrant but he's also prone to verbal confusion and he's completely disconnected from reality in all kinds of situations. At least so far, John, the polls would suggest they prefer the latter.
Or Robert F. Kennedy. For more, we're joined by the former chair of the Democratic Party and Vermont Governor, Dr. Howard Dean, who was also himself a leading contender for the presidency some 20 years ago. Howard Dean, welcome back to Planet America.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So, in retrospect, do you think that Joe Biden made a mistake last year when he decided he would run again?
Well, that's a hard question. In retrospect, you might say, oh, well, he's stumbling a bit. But the truth is that this president, who I am not particularly close to unlike previous Democratic presidents, probably has the best domestic policy record of anybody since Lyndon Johnson, who, while he had a dreadful foreign policy record, had a fantastic domestic policy and changed the earth and changed the country. Biden has delivered on climate change in a way that nobody else has. Biden has delivered on empowering women and people of color in a way that nobody else has come close to. Biden has created jobs in rural America in the tech industry, which is ironic because Trump's audience is mostly disaffected rural people who feel like they've been left behind. But this guy has really performed as president of the United States, and I think he deserves another term.
Now, the press are going nuts about a line in the report that I think has been taken out of context, and because Biden has committed a number of verbal gaffes and Trump has also committed a number of verbal gaffes. But isn't it a concern that just in the last 12 months, we've seen Biden visibly slow down, and he also appears to be physically diminished just in the last 12 months. So isn't it a worry that over 4 more years, he might not maintain the same competency?
I don't have that concern. I mean, his father lived till he was 86 or 88 or something. I don't have that concern. What he hasn't lost is any mental capacity. He may be a little slower. Maybe his memory's not working as well as it used to. This guy's made great foreign policy decisions. He is the first president who tried to put Netanyahu on the spot for overreaching, as Netanyahu often does. We haven't seen an American president of either party do that. So I think Biden has a grasp of world affairs and a grasp of domestic affairs that nobody else has, and certainly not Trump, who's basically a nutcase.
Fair enough. But if in a hypothetical scenario where Joe Biden decides he's not going to run again in November, or maybe he is incapacitated, he just can't run, what does your party process say happens next? Do you have a hastily convened national primary? Does it go to a brokered convention like in the old days? What happens?
The delegates to the convention, if they're released, have the power to vote for whoever they want. So what you would see is essentially an old-fashioned convention in a smoke-filled room type thing, except there'd be 3,000 of your closest friends in this auditorium, and they would, through a process, vote to decide who the nominee would be.
Now, Governor, leaving aside Biden's actual capacity, there's no doubt he's at the wrong end of a media feeding frenzy right now. Now, you know a bit about what it's like to be at the wrong end of a media feeding frenzy. So how does he beat it?
I actually think, even though I think the attorney was way out of line, incidentally, the attorney was a Trump appointee, but I actually argue that this came at a very good time. I'd rather be discussing this in February before the election than I would in October before the election. So, Trump has got plenty to worry about. He's about to be on trial for all kinds of things. I think there's 91 indictments against him. Soon enough, the spotlight will shift to him in ways that he can't control. He's done an incredible job. This is the one thing Trump is good at, is focusing attention on itself, because he has a personality disorder that depends on that. And, this is going to eventually blow over and for Biden, and we're going to start focusing on Trump and his misdeeds just at the right time, I think.
Of course, there is one way to make a lot of this go away, and that is for Joe Biden to do, as Nikki Haley and others have suggested, perform a basic mental competency test. That would dispel all of this, wouldn't it?
I'd like to see Trump do it first. If you get Trump to sit down with a diagnostic psychiatrist, I'd sign up Joe for anything, because I know what would happen with Trump.
Well, yes, Trump keeps boasting that he has passed a test involving whales and elephants and things.
Trump's problem is not his competency in terms of his memory, although he has that problem. Trump's problem is that he's a malignant narcissist and depends on the approbation of others. So it's impossible for him to make a decision that's not vindictive or self-interested. The irony of Trump is that the very people who are flocking to vote for him are the ones that are most screwed every time he passes a piece of legislation. Trump is interested in one thing, and that's Trump. He has no interest in the people who are supporting him, and he manipulates them in any way he can. So I actually think he's a danger to the United States.
Okay, that's Trump. But let's keep the focus on Joe Biden because there are questions specifically about him. Surely a cognitive test would make a lot of those concerns go away.
I'd be perfectly fine with that as long as Trump did the same thing.
Governor Howard Dean, great to get your thoughts. Thank you for joining us on Planet America.
Always enjoy it. Thanks. Say hi to everybody down under.
I should also say, John, on competency tests, ask the Obama administration whether the birth certificates ended the birtherism questions. I'm not necessarily sure the questions would end right there.
Yeah, it's a pity Trump's doctor died. We could have gotten him to write them for both of them.
Good call. Now, look, I'm going to perform a bit of a community service because it's become increasingly clear that both sides are planning to drown you in viral clips of their opponent looking old and confused. So here's a bit of a guide for you, okay? Both these guys are bad at reading auto cues, which is not a surprise because it's actually hard. Ask John and I. We stuff up all the time. But both of them try to cover up their mistakes when they stuff up, and it never looks good. Here's Biden.
My professor, well, I won't get into my professor. Well, look, my predecessor, though.
And here's Trump.
That's true. They don't go far. But it's certainly not great for your climb, they call it climate.
Nice saves, guys. So convincing. Now, look, auto cue stumbles can be embarrassing, but to make someone look truly senile, what you need to do is clip them in the most awkward, out of context way possible, halfway through sentences, so nothing they are saying makes sense. And then you provide a bodgy transcript in the tweet to make them look even worse. So, for instance, here's an attempt to make Biden look senile.
The beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes.
But if we play that clip in context, we can see that Biden is trying to read auto cue about the company Earth Rider using water from the Great Lakes to brew beer in their refinery, but he stuffs it up, tries to rescue it, fails, then he tries to improvise a joke about how Earth Rider must love the Great Lakes water because it creates beer.
And that's on top of another $1 billion to clean up the Great Lakes, which provide drinking water for 20 million people. 20 million people. And by the way, it used to make the beer brewed here. It is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. I wonder why it's trying. What we're doing in Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Okay, so that's not senile, but man, it was painful. How about when Trump got the same treatment?
Which is incapable of solving even the smallest problem. The simplest of problems we can no longer solve. We can't do anything. We are an institute and a powerful death penalty. We will put this on. We have.
So in this case, Trump was trying to read auto cue saying that we need to institute a powerful death penalty, but he stuffed it up, and it's clear in context.
We have become a drug-infested, crime-ridden nation, which is incapable of solving even the smallest problem. The simplest of problems we can no longer solve. We can't do anything. We are an institute and a powerful death penalty. We will put this on. We have to bring in the death penalty if we want to stop the infestation of drugs coming into our country.
Once again, not senile. So next time you see a viral clip of one of these guys looking senile, just eliminate it if it's out of context, if the transcript's misleading, or if it's just a standard everyday auto cue stuff up. And then you can focus on the 7,000 other viral attack clips in your Twitter feed. Welcome to the next 9 months.
Election 2024. What's at stake?
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania.
And that is all for this week's Planet America. Don't forget, if the temporary later broadcast time on ABC TV is getting a little bit too late for you, we will be available on iView by 9 p.m. every week. And you can also find us on YouTube and Facebook.
Also on the Fireside Chat at 8 p.m. on Friday on ABC News. It's also on iView and online, so we'll see you somewhere around there.
Bye-bye.